Welcome to week 3. Um, I'm going to try to do a few things better on my recorded lectures compared to the last 2 weeks. I will try to keep these two closer to 10 minutes. So far, I'm hitting 20 on both the previous, so we will try to get our way through this a little bit quicker. I will also try to stop saying. I went back and listened to my recording and was embarrassed at how many times I said So I'm sure I will not be perfect, but I'm going to try to do this a little bit better. This is my first time recording lectures every week, so I'm still kind of a rookie at this, but thank you for your patience, and here we go. Chapter 3 is Conceptual Foundations of Social Welfare Policy. There is a person doing dishes in the background. I hope it won't be too loud, but there's but we will fight through it. So this chapter is a real contrast from our last. I really enjoy the history. Last chapter was a really easier read. It was just following social welfare policy and social welfare, its beginnings in England and into America, and how it evolved. And I think that's really fun reading. This is really dense. So I'm going to try to get us through it. And I hope I can make some really dense stuff a little more clear. So we'll see how this goes. So, but the basic idea here is, when we think about social welfare, when we think about the policies that we've created, what is the foundational sort of thought underneath the surface? So here we go. So the text shows a graph on page 58 that I think is kind of helpful for at least it was for me. We have terms like ideologies, we have terms like theories, and we have terms like paradigms. And there's a box that sort of has an ideology sort of at the center of the box, a bigger box around that with theories, and then a bigger box that houses all of that with the term paradigms in it. And so that's sort of how we're going to talk about the conceptualization of social welfare. And so we're going to start with the smallest box, ideology. So these are some of the thoughts that the ideas that guide us as we think about social welfare. I'm going to list them here. Cause and function. This is an idea that was at the very beginning of social work history. Cause and function is sort of how they talked about the different realms of social work or human services. Cause being the issue that we're fighting, and then the responsibility of the social worker or the human services worker to think big picture about the greater cause that they're fighting, maybe poverty or homelessness or joblessness or that sort of thing. And then the function is the day-to-day, and early social workers, sort of the founding fathers of social work, reminded us that we needed to be sensitive to be about the cause and not to forget the day-to-day work that's involved in being a human services worker. Ideas like blaming the victim. The chapter gets into that concept, which has sort of troubled us all through our history. Who are we blaming here? Are we blaming the victim, or is there a system set up that is victimizing someone that we need to actually protect? the idea of the culture of poverty. I think that is a really fascinating idea. Then you have the breakdown between a conservative approach and a liberal political perspective. These two are always keeping tension as we think about these things. The idea of biological determinism. You know, a lot of times we talk about things like addiction as a disease, as something that there's like a biological DNA code that maybe makes one more susceptible to certain traps in society. And then the concept of social welfare services as a right. Is it a right, or what? Should we expect social welfare services? Let's keep going. Then we have theories of evolution of the social welfare system. So we have 6 in the chapter to consider. This is the first is this industrialization in the social welfare system. That this is a really interesting thing. We talked about this last week when we saw our society change from agrarian to an industrialized nation. Everything changed. The social welfare system really had to exist. We changed from large pieces of land and mostly farms, pretty independent situations to urban centers where humanity sort of just way more closely packed and opened us up to changes that we weren't ready for. There's another concept in this chapter, cycles of history. There's as we sort of look at social welfare history over 150 years now, we see trends. We see that we cycle as a society. Our thoughts sort of cycle. We swing from focusing on individual responsibilities and then into social responsibilities. It seems like it just always keeps cycling. Some folks see every 30 years sort of as the trend in America as the cycle shifts. So there's the idea of social control there, that this brings up all kinds of things. The ones at the top that are pulling strings, making policy and really changing day-to-day lives for millions of people. Who are these people with power, and what motivates them? Idea of elite power theory. The idea this handful of people really have way too much control, and what happens to a person when they have that kind of power. And then economics as a determinant of social welfare policy. So something that we've seen in our history lesson from last week is that when economic times are good, that affects how we see the poor, what we expect from someone who is poor in terms of responsibility or sort of thing. And sometimes, like we saw in the Great Depression, moments of economic downturn really flicks the light on in our collective brain that wow, sometimes somebody being poor isn't really their fault. There's a concept in here called critical theory. This is something that has gotten a lot of interest in the last couple of years, where critical theory was something sort of reserved for academics, and it's trickled down now to being promoted even in our high schools and middle schools across the country, and it is a controversial topic. It's a controversial theory that talks a lot about social control, elite power, and deconstruction of these things, and how far we should go with that. And so Yeah, critical theory. And as we come into a more modern time, we have this post-industrialization world and globalization. We are now so much more connected than we've ever been. How does that affect social welfare? We are so much more connected. The information age has evolved. We think about the war in Ukraine right now, and the ability for Ukrainians to get their plight out globally. I'm so interested as this thing really kicks off is how the rest of the world will respond and how quickly will they respond because of our interconnectedness. And I hope that we will respond quickly. So now we're into the biggest box. A paradigm is something bigger. A paradigm is an even more foundational way of thinking. I will sort of give the text definition. It says a paradigm is a pattern or model that forms a picture to help us understand social phenomena. So the biggest box of thought that we're talking about this chapter is a paradigm. Things like social construction, critical analysis, distributive justice, a strength-based model, social empathy, and I can break these down a little bit. The idea of social construction. How much of what we believe have we constructed? We construct all kinds of stereotypes and sometimes we construct a stereotype that just isn't true. Sometimes people with power have motives that aren't good, and sometimes they can use their power to construct a stereotype that protects them and makes vulnerable somebody else. And so we have to deconstruct some of these things, and that's a painful process sometimes. We've talked a little bit about critical analysis, really looking at these things and sometimes deconstructing. The idea of distributed justice, that justice sometimes needs to be distributed to more than just yourself. You seek justice on a collective level. I love the strength-based concept. That's a concept that a paradigm out of the social work sort of textbook. That can we look at people based on the things that their strengths, not just their weaknesses? Can we look at an impoverished community and say, all right, well, let's hone in on what this community has, that's assets, not just the things that it does not have. And then a paradigm that sort of kicks off the whole movement of social welfare in America is this social empathy, more than just the individual, but can we as a collective think about someone else with compassion? And in this process, we find conflicting beliefs all the time. I'm starting to embrace the conflict a little more now than I ever did before. And really seeing that conflicting beliefs are actually good things. Can we enter into a discussion of ideologies and theories and paradigms? The typical social work classroom is a really liberal place. That really bothers me. I personally, I see such value in having conversations where two conflicting beliefs come together, and the truth from each side, and only in those moments can the truths from both sides come together, and we come away with something more complete in our heads, in our concepts. So I hope that in this chapter, you can take a minute and start to really understand your own beliefs, your own biases. What are you bringing to the table? What about that is good? And what about that, needs to change? There are things from sort of where I come from that give me some advantages and give me some, I have my own little nugget of truth that I think I can bring to a discussion. But what else am I bringing? What other things have made me jaded or biased or blind? So I hope we can really approach this course with open mind. I love this text because it really does give a really complete picture of all the sides, or at least a lot of the sides to all the debates that we have. So hey, there we are. We're done. I want to say that I've done this in at least under 20 minutes, but I hope that you can make it through this chapter. It's a little bit dense, but I hope that helps to maybe give a little bit of a Cliff Note version. So we'll see you in week 4.